Welcome to our comprehensive lesson on basic English sentence structure, focusing on the fundamental trio of subject, verb, and object. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll dive deeply into what these three parts are, why they are so important, and how they come together to form clear, simple sentences. Throughout this video, you'll see and hear multiple examples, from everyday expressions like, "I eat breakfast," to slightly more advanced practice sentences that help you gain confidence. Understanding the essential framework, subject, verb, and object, will give you a solid base to build upon as you learn more complex grammar rules later on. Even if you're new to English, this structure is straightforward once you grasp the basics. We'll start by exploring the definition of each element, then see how they fit together, and finally practice forming sentences you can use right away in real-life conversations. By keeping our scenes short and focused, you can absorb each concept gradually while enjoying smooth transitions that tie everything together. Pay close attention to the upcoming examples. Repetition and step-by-step examples will help solidify your understanding. Remember, consistent practice is the key to fluency. Don't worry about making mistakes at first. Correcting those mistakes is part of the learning process. In the next scene, we'll begin by defining the first crucial component, the subject. Let's get started. The subject of a sentence is the person, place, thing, or idea responsible for carrying out the action described by the verb. In other words, the subject does or is something. For instance, in the simple sentence, "I run," the word "I" is the subject because it refers to the individual who is running. Similarly, if you say, "The cat sleeps," the word "cat" is the subject, the one performing the action of sleeping. Subjects can be simple pronouns like I, you, or they can be more complex noun phrases like "my best friend" or "that bright yellow car." The key thing to remember is that the subject usually answers the question, who or what is performing the action, or who or what is being described. As you continue learning English, you'll see that identifying the subject can become trickier in questions or sentences that start with phrases like "there is" or "here are." But for now, just focus on the idea that the subject is the main actor in a sentence. Recognizing the subject sets the stage for the next vital element, the verb. In the next scene, we'll break down exactly what a verb is and how it interacts with the subject to shape the core meaning of your sentence. Keep in mind that in normal conversation, the subject often comes first, guiding the listener to understand who or what the sentence is about. Let's move on to verbs now. A verb is often described as an action word, something that indicates what the subject is doing. Verbs like run, eat, drink, or watch show activities that can be performed or observed. However, verbs also include words that describe a state of being, such as am, is, are, or become, which point to conditions rather than obvious actions. For example, "I am happy" uses the verb am to show a state of being rather than an action you can see. Verbs are the heartbeat of a sentence. Without a verb, we generally don't have a complete statement. "He swims" is a full sentence, but without "swims," you'd be left with just "he," which doesn't tell us anything meaningful about what he is doing or experiencing. In English, verbs can change form depending on the subject or the tense. For instance, "I eat, but he eats." In the past tense, "I ate" or "he ate." These changes might seem challenging at first, but they actually help communicate time, number, and context. For now, focus on the fact that a verb ties closely to the subject. The subject does the verb. If you can clearly identify who or what your subject is, You can then choose the verb that best represents the action or state of being. Next, we'll talk about objects, those items or entities that receive the action of the verb. Understanding the object is the final piece of the puzzle in forming a clear, direct sentence. Get ready to see how adding an object can complete the simple subject-verb-object structure. Objects are the part of a sentence that often receive the action of the verb. If you say, "I read a book," the word book is the object because it's the thing being read. Likewise, in "she drinks water," water is the object because it's what she's drinking. Objects can be simple nouns like apples or cars, but they can also be pronouns, phrases, or even entire clauses, depending on how advanced the sentence is. When you hear the phrase subject-verb-object, it means the basic structure goes, who is doing something, what are they doing, and what or who are they doing it to? For example, the teacher explains the lesson. Here, the teacher is the subject, explains is the verb, and the lesson is the object, what is being explained. Sometimes, sentences don't need an object. For example, he laughs is complete without one. But in many everyday expressions, especially when you want to talk about actions that affect something else, the object becomes crucial. Not only does it add clarity, but it also makes your sentence far more informative. In the next scene, we'll see how these three elements, subject, verb, and object, fit together in simple, practical sentences you can start using right away. Keep in mind that mastering this basic structure will make it easier to move on to more advanced grammar features, like direct and indirect objects or object complements. Let's see some real examples. Now let's bring all three parts together, subject, verb, and object. Consider these sentences: I eat apples, he drives a car, or they watch movies. Each follows the pattern of who or what subject doing what verb and to whom or what object. This structure is incredibly common in English, and by mastering it, you can already form a multitude of practical sentences. Let's break down I eat apples. I is the subject because that's the person performing the action. Eat is the verb, showing what action is being done. Apples is the object, the thing being eaten. Notice how each part provides essential information, remove any piece, and the sentence either becomes incomplete or loses clarity. Another example, she drinks tea every morning. She is the subject, drinks is the verb, and tea is the object. You can add details like every morning to expand the sentence, but the core remains SVO. At this point, you might notice you can swap out different subjects, verbs, or objects to create new sentences. We eat rice. They drink coffee. You read books, and so on. This flexibility is why focusing on SVO is so beneficial when you're starting out. Next, we'll expand on these sentences with common, everyday verbs and objects so you can confidently talk about routine actions in English. Let's apply the SVO structure to some of the most common verbs you'll use in everyday life. Verbs like eat, drink, read, and watch describe actions we do almost daily. Think about how many different sentences you can make with just these four verbs. I eat rice. She eats breakfast. We drink water. He drinks coffee. They read books. You read magazines. I watch movies. She watches the news. Notice that by changing the subject pronoun, I, you, he, she, we, they, you can quickly multiply the number of sentences you can produce. The same goes for objects. I eat pasta. I eat fruit. I eat cereal. As you mix and match subjects, verbs, and objects, you'll gradually develop a stronger command of English sentence construction. Don't forget to pay attention to verb forms, especially if you're using the third-person singular, he, she, it. For instance, he watches TV needs an ease ending, whereas I watch TV does not. Mastering these small changes makes your English sound more natural. Keep practicing with these verbs until you feel comfortable, then expand your vocabulary with more actions and more interesting objects. Next, we'll try a few more everyday verbs to keep building variety and help you talk about different activities in your daily routine. Continuing with our practical approach, let's look at additional verbs to expand your everyday conversation skills. Write, play, listen, and speak. Here are some examples to illustrate how you can use them in subject-verb-object form. I write letters. He writes emails. They play basketball. She plays the guitar. We listen to music. You listen to podcasts. I speak English. She speaks Spanish. Again, notice the variety you gain just by changing the subject or the object. You can easily adapt these sentences to your own life. I write essays. They play soccer. We speak French, etc. With each repetition, you're reinforcing not only the structure, but also the correct verb form and vocabulary. One of the best ways to improve is to practice constructing these sentences aloud. Even if you're practicing alone, hearing yourself speak helps build muscle memory for the language. If possible, record yourself or use a language partner for feedback. The more you experiment with different subjects, verbs, and objects, the more comfortable you'll become with spontaneous conversation. Up next, we'll cover some common pitfalls and tips to help you avoid confusion, such as when the subject-verb agreement changes or when objects aren't needed at all. Mastering these details will ensure your sentences remain clear and grammatically correct. Even with the simple SVO structure, learners often encounter a few challenges. One common pitfall is subject-verb agreement, which means ensuring the verb matches the subject's number and person. For example, you say, he drinks coffee, but they drink coffee. Mixing up these forms is an easy slip to make, but repeated practice helps you overcome it. Another area of confusion arises when certain verbs don't require an object. He sleeps is already a complete thought, but some learners might feel tempted to add an unnecessary object. Always ask yourself whether the action is being done to something or someone else. If it isn't, no object is needed. Also, watch out for pronoun consistency. If you start your sentence with we, make sure the verb form corresponds to that pronoun. Avoid switching from we to they without a clear reason. Maintaining consistency helps listeners follow your ideas more easily. Lastly, remember that while SVO is the most common structure in simple sentences, English does allow for variations, especially when you add phrases of time, place, or manner, or when you form questions. However, these variations usually still rely on the core SVO idea for clarity. In the final scene, we'll wrap up what we've learned and offer a few final thoughts on incorporating these sentence patterns into your daily practice. Keep going, you're almost at the finish line. Congratulations on completing this in-depth look at the subject-verb-object structure. By now, you should have a clear understanding of how these three elements work together to form basic, coherent sentences in English. You've learned to identify who or what performs an action, the subject, what the action is, the verb, and who or what receives that action, the object. You've also practiced using everyday verbs and seen how just a few adjustments, like choosing the correct pronoun or switching the verb form, can significantly change a sentence's meaning. Don't be afraid to experiment further. Try substituting different subjects, exploring new verbs, and adding varied objects to expand your expressive range. You can also include adjectives, adverbs, and phrases of time or place, building your sentences outward from the foundational SVO. The more variety you introduce, the more fluid your speech and writing will become. Keep practicing daily. Talk about your routines, what you eat, what you drink, what you watch or read. Describe what you write, play, or listen to. Make short paragraphs or dialogues that reflect real-life situations. And if you ever feel stuck, return to the basics. Identify your subject, pick your verb, and see if you need an object. With consistent effort and curiosity, you'll quickly find yourself constructing more complex statements and asking richer questions. Thank you for joining us in this session. Keep up the good work, and remember that every sentence you form is one step closer to mastering the language. Good luck on your English learning journey.